Welcome back. Today is all about Khechari Mudra. It's very disheartening to see that there isn't a clear, progressive tutorial out there explaining how to accomplish Khechari Mudra. It's a physical accomplishment, nonetheless it is a humongous accomplishment. They say it makes you the king of yogis. It's very, very valuable. You're basically taking what can be argued as your primary sense organ, the tongue, and putting it back directly into your brain to stimulate the deep brain, specifically the pituitary gland, which in turn stimulates the pineal and the medulla. So this is a very, very big deal. This is humongous. Why is the tongue the primary sense organ? Because it's where we eat, and if you don't eat, you die. And if you've ever been super hungry, which most of us have, you know what that feels like. It's an urgency that will override every other necessity in life. So the base necessities are for survival, and that will always be food and shelter. We don't have a sense for shelter, but we do have a sense organ for food, and that is the tongue. So you could argue that it is the primary sense organ, and we're taking that primal sense organ, and we're putting it back into the brain in Khechari. So the first step for this is to take the tongue and lift it up. You want to put the tip of the tongue right behind the upper teeth, and you want to seal the tongue to the roof of the mouth like that. Now if you just push the tongue to the roof of the mouth, it's not going to seal right. You have to push it up so that it touches the back of your front teeth, your upper front teeth, and seal the length of it as long as you can to the roof of the hard palate. So that looks like this. You're gonna push the chin down strongly in order to stretch the connective tissue between your tongue and your lower jaw. And that's gonna make a little click, so you're gonna go like this. So the tongue releases and it clicks. And this is called Talabya Kriya. It doesn't matter what you call it, you're stretching your tongue. Just stretching the tongue will help to relax the linguistic mind because of that, we've talked about this before, that strong neural connection between the tongue and the left brain. So we're stretching that out. And the same way that stretching all the muscles in your body induces relaxation, in the same way stretching your tongue induces relaxation in the linguistic mind. It settles it down a little bit. So just stretching will help your meditation. Just stretching the tongue, that's all we're doing right now, and it will help your meditation to become more silent and more relaxed. So again, this is Talabya Kriya. So you push the tongue to the roof of the mouth and then pull the chin down strongly until it clicks free. That's it. That's Talabya Kriya. And that's where the majority of instruction stops. And you gotta look really hard to hear anything else, but not today. The second thing we can do with the tongue is fold it back and try and touch the uvula. That's that little piece of skin in the soft palate that's hanging down in the back of the throat. We've seen it in all the cartoon movies. It's hanging back there. So you're going to stretch the tongue, fold it backwards to touch that point. So that's tongue exercise number 2. Number 3, do the same thing. Stretch the tongue back to touch the uvula. and then push the base of the tongue at the front of the mouth. You're gonna push it up towards the hard palate. So you're stretching the base, and by pushing the base of the tongue at the front of the mouth, you're pushing it up as if you want the base of the tongue to touch the hard palate. So you've got the tongue back, right? You're trying to touch the uvula, and you're gonna take this part of the tongue, you're gonna push it, you're gonna take the front part of the tongue and you're gonna push it up towards the hard palate to get more of a stretch at this base, stretching that connective tissue, the frenulum, underneath the tongue. Okay, so that looks like this. Nothing to see, right? It's all internal. So that's exercise number 3. At any point in this, you can take a towel, stick out your tongue, and grab it, and just pull it out in order to stretch the tongue. And I'm just pulling the tongue straight out in order to stretch it, to get a deeper and longer stretch, which I am fully in control of because I'm using my hands. So what is that? That's number 4, right? So here's where we really start to make a difference. At some point, your tongue will be, that connective tissue under the tongue will be stretched out enough that you will be able, and this is a long process, by the way. So at some point, that connective tissue under the tongue will be stretched out enough that you can actually put the tongue into the nasal pharynx. That's the space which is above the soft palate. So put your tongue straight up, you feel that hard palate, that's the hard palate. Put it back a little farther, it becomes soft. That's the soft palate. At the back of the soft palate is the uvula. If you can get past the uvula and push the tongue into the nasal pharynx, that space up there is the nasal pharynx. But for step number 5, we're gonna actually push the tongue in there. So I'm gonna take my finger and shove the tongue so it can slip past that uvula, because that's the hard part, getting past the uvula. I'm just gonna push it back in there because my tongue is stretched out enough. And you can continue to use the fingers to push the tongue backwards in a nice, easy, gentle stretch. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time. It's a long process, and have patience with yourself, all right? But we're gonna take the fingers, push the tongue into the nasal pharynx, and continue to push the tongue backwards, stretching the base of the tongue, stretching out that connective tissue. Now, that's step number 5, pushing on the base of the tongue. If you don't get the tongue into the nasal pharynx, don't worry about it. Just continue to easily and gradually stretch the base of the tongue. Once you get it into the nasal pharynx, once you actually accomplish getting the tongue in there, it can be a bit disconcerting. This is something totally new for you and your body. Most importantly, it's new for your body. Your body's not used to this position at all. So what you want to do immediately right away, once you start getting the tongue into the nasal pharynx, you're going to want to do something which is very, very good for you anyway. You want to get yourself a glass of water, and you want to put a little bit of salt, maybe a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons, depending on how sensitive you are. Stir it up real well. It's going to clean out your mouth. It's going to clean off the top of your tongue, and most importantly, it's gonna clean out and sterilize your nasal pharynx. And that's gonna make pushing your tongue into your nasal pharynx much more comfortable and less reactive. All right, so that's step number 6, right? Step number 7, here's the step that no one tells you. Once you start getting the tongue, you can push it into the nasal pharynx. Your next step is to push it into the nasal pharynx over and over and over again. And that means maybe 10, 12 times a day. Every day. Take your fingers. Push it into the nasal pharynx and see how long you can keep it there comfortably without having a reaction. And when I say reaction, I mean it makes you want to sneeze. It might give you a slight gag reflex. These are completely normal because, again, you're working with something which is entirely new to you and your body. And you gotta get used to it. You gotta get past all of that. You gotta clean out the nasal pharynx with the salt water, clean off the top of your tongue with the salt water, and reach that place of comfortability. But this has to happen over and over and over again. You gotta push that tongue back. Now we're stretching out that connective tissue under the tongue, and we're stretching the soft palate, and we're reprogramming the soft palate that it's okay for the tongue to go up into the nasal pharynx. This is completely normal, completely natural, and I've heard of children finding their way to doing this when they felt like they had something stuck in their mouth. They just kept trying and trying and trying, and one day the tongue went up. And there are cases where yogis have told me that the tongue was automatically pulled up, but it's very rare. And some people will tell you, don't worry about Khechari, it's gonna happen naturally, just like it did for 1,000,000% of the entire world. It's just gonna happen for you. I don't believe that. If you never stretch to touch your toes, but some people can go stretch and touch their toes, do you believe that if you never stretch, you're never gonna touch your toes? That doesn't add up, right? So you gotta stretch it. So that would be number 7. You wanna take the tongue and repeatedly push it up into the nasal pharynx. And once you start doing that, it's gonna start, eventually, it's gonna start going in all by itself. You'll be able to just push the tongue up into the nasal pharynx. And that's what it looks like. So now you have 7 steps to gaining mastery of Khechari Mudra. And I don't think you're gonna find a more comprehensive progression than that. Pretty sure this is the most comprehensive tutorial on the face of the planet for Khechari Mudra. And it's nothing special, it's nothing earth-shattering, you just gotta know what you're talking about. So what does all this accomplish for you? You're taking the tongue, you're putting it right in the brain, and as you wander about with your tongue, you're going to come up against the bone which separates the nostrils. And you'll notice that it's very sensitive. It has a lot of nerve endings, and it's very, very sensitive. And that's going to do something, just by itself, it's going to do something to your brain and your concentration. And you can touch the nerve endings in the left nostril and in the right nostril. And as you do so, you will begin to balance the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system to a degree that you've never balanced it before, and that is humongous. Okay, don't do it with your fingers. Don't do that. That's really, it's not good. It's a forceful practice, and it's a bit dangerous. So I don't recommend that practice. But when you do it internally with your tongue, that is much, much more natural and not forced. The third thing, as you continue to wander with your tongue, you're going to come up that separating bone and you're going to come up to the very top of the nasal pharynx. And so that's going to be right about here in the brain. And you're going to notice that there's a little bit of a dip. So you come up that sharp bone and you come to the top, and then there's a little, just a tiny indentation. It's very small. And that is the sphenoid sinus. And that is our ending point. That's where we want to be. We want the tongue fully erect and stretched and lightly touching the sphenoid sinus. And what's on the other side of the sphenoid sinus? The pituitary gland. So you're right there, right deep in your brain. It's an amazing way to foster stimulation of the deep brain. Something that no one is pointing out thus far is that right above the pituitary gland is the neural connection. So in Shambhavi Mudra, we take the two eyes and we put them up here. We look up to the spiritual eye and we say that we're taking the energy from the two eyes and we're putting it back into the one spiritual eye. So from the two we go back to the one, right? Very important. Shambhavi Mudra is very important. Now, with Khechari, we're taking the tongue, the sense organ of the tongue, and all of its primal energy and putting it back to the same point where the nerves connect and cross for the two eyes. The name of that.
And a structure in the brain called the optic chiasm. Each optic nerve splits and half of its fibers cross over to the other side.
So the nerves for the eyes come back into the brain and they cross. And the place that they cross is called the optic chiasm. And that point, which is right here, is directly above the sphenoid sinus. So if you're meditating and you're seeing a little bit of light, and then you get into Khechari Mudra and you stretch it enough that you begin to touch the sphenoid sinus, get ready for an explosion of light, because you're putting energy into the pituitary gland and what's right above it, the optic chiasm. And all of that energy is going to find its way back to the pineal gland and the medulla. And that point is so important. More on that next time. Thanks for sticking around. Please sign up for the journey, subscribe, and I'll see you around.